Hi, I'm David Blakesley, and this is my review of the new Criterion Collection release of Charles Chaplin's A Woman of Paris, starring Edna Purviance. You see Chaplin's name is lower in the order here. This is because he wanted to make Edna Purviance a dramatic star after years of basically serving as his female sidekick in a lot of his shorter comedies. Charlie Chaplin was breaking out and doing his own thing, pursuing his own creative vision in this 1923 release, his second feature film. However, before I get into talking about the movie, I want to just kind of give a little bit of a recap on the Criterion Collection's history with Charlie Chaplin. You know, Chaplin was kind of his own sort of special category of filmmaker and performer. You can make the argument that he was the world's first global media superstar. His image was kind of shared all over the world in his little short reels, little 10, 12, 15-minute comedy bits there that got a little bit longer as his popularity grew and as the audience interest in seeing more and more of Charlie took over. In the 1910s, he became a really instantly identifiable character, even from his silhouette. You know, the bowler hat, the little mustache, the funny walk, swinging the cane. You've seen all of that before. Charlie Chaplin was a pretty big deal. As far as the Criterion Collection was concerned, though, it was quite a long time before they got the rights to release any of his films. Back around 2005, when the Criterion Collection was in its DVD era, there was a pretty significant release of Charlie Chaplin films on DVD through a different publisher, different imprint. But after that had kind of run its course, those discs went out of print, and the Criterion Collection got a hold of the Chaplin Library as part of their kind of permanent Janus Films collection. And it began with Modern Times. This was spine number, 543. So they were very well into it already, 500 plus movies into their release history. But once they got a hold of those Charlie Chaplin films, they kept them coming pretty frequently. So for a few years here, we got a lot of Chaplin, including The Great Dictator, spine 565, The Gold Rush, another one of his early silent comedies that was later recut in the 1940s with sound added. That's spine 615. Monsieur Verdoux, a controversial and kind of unusual pick given some of the other titles they could have released first, but I guess they wanted to get this one in there. Kind of a grim black comedy about a serial killing, philandering man who takes on wives and then finds ways, humorous but creative ways to get rid of them. Here's one of his big classics, City Lights. You know, beautiful. This is one of their dual format. It's got a DVD and Blu-ray in there during that little phase of Criterion's history there. Lovely film, beautiful cover too, that kind of silvery metallic paint. And then Limelight. Limelight was a kind of one of, transitioning into his later career. This is after Monsieur Verdoux. Most famous perhaps because it's got a sequence featuring Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton on stage at the same time and doing a little bit of interacting. This is the only film that they were both ever in together. The Kid came along. That was his first feature film, another kind of obligatory, legendary film that really kind of got Charlie Chaplin moving into a whole other level of artistry and kind of creating his own cinematic vision. And then finally The Circus came out. That was spine number 996, so just before the Godzilla mega box set came out. The Circus was the most recent Charlie Chaplin release. Hilarious, late 1920s. The scene on the tightrope with the monkeys just absolutely makes me laugh just thinking about it. But then we've got the new one here, A Woman of Paris. This is spine 1253. So you can see there's been quite a gap of time since we've gotten The Circus. It was a 2019 release. Yeah, so 2019, here we are 6 years later, roughly, 2019 to 25. A Woman of Paris finally makes its debut. Now, where does this fit into Chaplin's filmography? Good question. For one, it's kind of a standalone, unique, one-of-a-kind title because it is a serious drama in which Chaplin himself does not appear, except for one very small cameo bit where he's pretty well disguised. The disc will point out to you where he makes his appearance, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's a fine little piece there, but I'll let the disc tell you where you're going to find and spot Charlie. But he was pretty much incognito as far as audiences were concerned until the secret was eventually revealed. So yes, as I said at the top here, Charlie Chaplin had the rights to make his own movie, and he decided to do this. This is after The Kid and before everything else that I've just shown you. This was his second feature film. Edna Purviance was getting a little bit, in Chaplin's opinion anyways, a little bit mature for comedy roles, and he wanted to give her a showcase so that she could have a sort of an extension of her career rather than just being the ingenue sidekick, but kind of a woman who could carry a leading role performance. And I think she does very well here. She's very capable. The one thing that Edna Purviance does not have is like this kind of overwhelming charisma or screen presence. Like I say, she's very capable. She's good at what she does. She has sort of an ordinariness about her that I think makes her maybe not stand out quite as much. And I don't know that if she had not had the association with Charles Chaplin, she may not have been as well remembered or as fondly regarded as she is, you know, by at least Chaplin fans nowadays. But this is a story about a kind of a love triangle of sorts. This woman of Paris, she begins her life, her name is Marie St. Clair, as a very kind of poor, average, kind of looked down upon woman in Parisian society. Actually, she's from a village somewhat remote from Paris, the French countryside. She gets to Paris eventually and gets the fancy get-up. You see the headdress and the pearls and the aura of sophistication, right? At the beginning of the film, in a little village, she's under the thumb of a very cruel father who's trying to control her. Maybe he senses there's something a little bit wild or untamable about this young woman. She has a boyfriend, a painter, Jean, the boyfriend who eventually becomes a fiance. He proposes to her, but Jean's father is also opposed to their relationship. And so we've basically got a pair of young lovers whose desire for each other is strongly frowned upon by the fathers in each of their lives. This turns into a bit of a tension as Marie is wondering, will Jean follow through on his commitment? And they decide they're going to elope to Paris. And she has the tickets. She's at the station. Jean has to go back home and pack his bags. But then something happens that disrupts his ability to get back to the train station. They even actually have a phone call, but there's just a failure to communicate. And Marie concludes that he's stood her up. He wasn't serious about the engagement, and he is going to break her heart, let her down. She's already got the ticket. She's on her way to Paris. She has nothing to lose and nothing to stay in her little village for. Family relationships are smashed, and she's just got to go and strike out on her own. Flash forward a year later, and she is this kind of sophisticated flapper gal of the early 1920s, and you understand that she's taken on the acquaintance of a Pierre Revel, a very rich playboy, a Parisian man about town, played by Adolphe Menjou, and he is spectacularly smug and charismatic in this role. He really aces the vibe of a guy who's got all the money he would ever need, has no responsibilities, and he's just going to live according to his whims and, seize upon the next pretty face that tickles his fancy and have his fun and not really think too much about it. And so that's the guy that Marie St. Clair has gotten herself involved with. She's a kept woman. She lives in a very luxurious apartment. She's even got housemaids that attend to her. But she's basically Pierre's plaything. And she's taken it for what it's worth. You might call her a gold digger, but it seems like, she's not really taking cruel advantage of Pierre. He's basically very happy to indulge her with all the trifles and material goods that she may desire, as long as there's no strings attached or no forceful pressure to commit or to make this any kind of a permanent thing. And as the movie goes on, you see just how callous Pierre really is towards Marie, and it becomes a bit of a tension as Jean re-enters her life, wants to kind of reconcile, although he starts to get suspicious about why is Marie living in such splendor? What else is going on in her life to account for wealth and just this new personality, this air of sophistication that makes her feel different than the village girl that he knew just a year earlier. So that's kind of the setup. I won't say a lot more about the plot, although it's basically a melodrama with some touches of humor. This isn't a stark, serious film like maybe like an Ingmar Bergman, chamber drama or something like that. There are Chaplin-esque touches to the humor, and I get the sense that he is in a way empathizing with the plight of women like Marie St. Clair. Think about this. Charlie Chaplin was in his early 30s when he made this film. He had been living the high life in Hollywood for nearly a decade now, certainly for quite a few, several years, where he's probably encountered a lot of young women who fit this profile and seen a lot of men flush with money who had their little side chicks and casual, impetuous arrangements, right? Chaplin himself probably was one of those guys too. But I think he had a compassionate heart for these young women. And there are also some jabs at the patriarchy. So there is a sort of a progressive ethos at work here. The story takes on kind of a redemptive quality, and there's sort of some tragic elements towards the end there. But it's a it's a very watchable, compelling film if you like silent movies with a little bit of a melodramatic tinge. One of the things that this film was praised for by critics at the time and has been part of its continuing reputation, he gives his characters a naturalism and a kind of a real person responses and dialogue. There are just little touches of ordinary interactions and frustrations and emotional tensions that you might not see in a lot of silent films from this era, where the acting is still kind of stagey and grandiose and kind of delivering to the back rows, kind of over the top style, certainly by comparison with today's acting. And so this is a movie that's still going to show its age. I don't want to make it seem like this was something that could have just been made yesterday or even 5 or 10 years ago. It's a 102-year-old movie, right? So it does have a lot of relics of its time, but it is definitely a breath of fresh air from other movies that were made contemporaneously. So even though it doesn't star Charlie Chaplin, even if you don't get your fill of the Little Tramp like you do, or what his character evolved into as he aged once he left the Little Tramp behind after modern times, I would say this is a pretty essential entry into the Charlie Chaplin canon. I'm very glad that Criterion has put this out for us who like to sort of be completionistic towards the works of Charlie. Here's the rest of my collection. I've got his earliest films, Chaplin at Keystone on DVD. I've got the SNA comedies from 1915 in this beautiful Flicker Alley set. And then another set from that same company, the Mutual comedies. This really nice little metallic box here. The one big missing piece, well, there's a few missing pieces. The biggest one, in my opinion, is the first National comedies. Those are shorter films. They're maybe right at the border between shorts and feature length, but like Soldier Arms and what's the one, Summerside, and there's I think a couple others that really, I don't know that there's a good quality disc release out there. There's also King in New York, which I hope Criterion will eventually get. I think you can stream it on the Criterion channel, but the one that they don't have currently, and I hope would get a better release someday, is his final film, A Countess from Hong Kong. But you can see the cover here, Marlon Brando, Sophia Loren, directed by Charlie Chaplin. He's not a main actor, although he does have a pretty clearly signaled appearance as kind of a porter. He's a kind of a wait staff on board this luxury liner. So that's kind of Charlie's final feature-length film appearance, written and directed by Charlie Chaplin there. So that's one that may be in a little bit of a rights limbo. I'm not sure Criterion has the rights or will get the rights to it. It's not especially a great movie, but it is his last one, and I definitely would like to see that in a little bit better edition than this kind of old school DVDs. There's a wide screen across the top there. So yeah, my review of Woman of Paris is complete. I'll drop some short video of the packaging following this, maybe with a few other comments. Let's take a look at that packaging. Let's start with the beautiful cover design by artist Timothy Petides. Criterion brought in different artists for each of their Chaplin releases, and I think they chose especially well for this one here. I don't know anything else about him, but he did a wonderful job. I'll say more about the supplements after this little sequence is over, but there's the disc, and there's Edna Picanecchia clutching her pearls on the poster, which I'll unfold in just a moment. One of her beautiful diaphanous gowns. She's very well dressed in this film. And there's the poster on this pretty nice thick paper stock with the essay on the other side and a little bit from Timothy Brock. He's the arranger who took Chaplin's music and made an alternate soundtrack. I'll have more to say about that in just a moment as well. So there's the whole package. And yeah, this is the opening menu. I will say this is not quite as robust as the earlier Criterion Chaplin releases, but they've rounded it out very well. And there's a look at the menu for all the supplements that I'm about to describe to you in just a moment. All right, let me take a minute to talk about the supplements on the disc there. I'll put those up on the screen as we talk about what are some of the extras that kind of round out the package here. We do have an introduction to the film by a scholar, David Robinson, called A Serious Drama. It's a 22-minute look at sort of the making of, behind the scenes, kind of where Chaplin was at in his career. This was the first production he made for United Artists. This is the team up with Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford, and D.W. Griffith that Chaplin entered into after he had kind of fulfilled all of his earlier contracts for making short comedies. This was kind of an artistic coming out for him, and also just a very big event in the history of Hollywood and of movie making in general, the emergence of United Artists. So they kind of get into that a little bit. There's even a little short film, sort of a recreation of the signing of the contract, a mugging for the camera between Fairbanks and Chaplin and Mary Pickford. Kind of just a cute little sort of throw in there, about 3 minutes or so of outtake footage or some publicity stuff. There's also the carryovers from those old DVDs that I mentioned at the beginning. Chaplin Today, A Woman of Paris, some interviews with Liv Ullmann and Michael Powell. So that's kind of an interesting, kind of putting it back in the context of the late 90s, early 2000s, probably when those interviews were conducted, and the influence that this film in particular had on those two great artists, Liv Ullmann and Michael Powell, from Powell and Pressburger, if that name doesn't ring any bells. The Archers, okay? There's a nice supplemental archive commentary about A Woman of Paris. This is just like 9 minutes long. It is in French, so you got to read the subtitles. But it's really about the restoration of the film and the, a little bit of background, but also the soundtrack, which is probably the most key extra supplement here, is a full-length alternate soundtrack cut of the film, which is interesting because the feature, the main one here, is the Chaplin Estate approved version that he re-released in 1976. At that time, Chaplin, I think, was in his late 80s, and he composed an original soundtrack, pretty well on in years, and that was the score that's on the main film, as well as about 7 or 8 minutes worth of deleted scenes or edits where he excised some bits from the original to tighten up the film a little bit. There's not a whole lot that's changed substantially. In fact, I don't really think there's anything that you would say is a rewrite or rearrangement of the movie. He just took little sequences out here and there and just, trimmed it up a little bit. But the alternate soundtrack is about that 7 or 8 minutes longer, and so it's a slightly different cut of the film, and you cannot switch the audio from the main feature to the alternate soundtrack, and I'll say more about that alternate sound. But it basically is a full cut of the film with what I would say is a more well-rounded musical composition. So the Timothy Brock version, which uses Chaplin's actual music that he composed over the course of several decades. This guy did a lot of research and really dug in and found good material that would make, I think, a more kind of richly instrumental accompaniment to the images we see on screen. Chaplin's version is fine, but it's a lot of like these high sheen strings, and it's pretty repetitious, and so it kind of becomes a little bit overbearing. I mean, not bad, not distractingly bad, but I definitely preferred the alternate version, and also you get some of the cuts that are restored into the film. So I actually do like the shorter version of the film with the tightness that Chaplin introduced. So you get both versions on this disc, and there is also a supplement that shows what those deleted scenes were, so you can identify them in your memory, if you will, of watching either the full film with the alternate soundtrack or the official release, which is shorter and with Chaplin's late in career soundtrack instead. And then there's a short interview with Raleigh Tothero. He was Chaplin's cinematographer. So it's basically just some reminiscences of him going back to the days of starting United Artists, filming A Woman of Paris, Charlie's relationship with Edna Purviance, and his desire to kind of, put her on a career trajectory, because he knew that he was not going to be making comedies with her anymore and not casting her as his go-to leading lady. So, yeah, that's a little bit about the supplements. But yeah, if you like silent film, if you like Charlie Chaplin, this is a Blu-ray only release, which is fine. I don't think you need to have this on 4K. Save yourself the extra $5 or $10 and get this disc. It's a great addition to the Criterion Collection. Hopefully they're not totally done with Charlie Chaplin yet, but this is a good one to get into your library if this is the kind of movie that appeals to you.